How can you get your age so wrong?
Oh no, what a shame. What a shame. Here I was preparing a special episode of the show to mark Meghan Markle's 45th birthday. I've got Link Lauren, one of Meghan Markle's biggest supporters in the United States of America, and we were just going to celebrate how this lady has turned 45. And Link, it's just such bad news because all of a sudden, this birthday, this 45th birthday, has turned into an absolute disaster for Meghan Markle.
I think when I was 30, if I thought about 50, I thought that is an awful long way away. And I don't really need to think about it. And then I blinked and I'm 50. That's crazy.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
Many people out there have been speculating on that Meghan Markle has lied about her age. Is she actually older?
Yesterday, she turned 45. That was the number on the cake, the number in the caption, and the number that newspapers on both sides of the Atlantic printed without hesitation. But within just 4 hours, thousands of people under every royal channel on this platform were doing what they do every August, counting backward and somehow coming up with a different answer.
I'm going to quote Tom Bauer by saying, he said, look, we all laughed at Samantha and she was right. And everything she said has come true.
I've been going through those comments for a long time. And this year, I noticed something I had not seen before. A lot of people seem to be asking the wrong parent. They keep focusing on the father. That is where the online debate starts, because some viewers say he would know. He was there, and people online are pointing out that a man would usually know when his daughter was born.
Meghan was born, and she was born as a C-section, so she was put in my arm. I was the first person to hold her. Her little hand went on my fingers like that.
People keep bringing up the half-sister, the classmates, the yearbooks, and that old magazine page from 1997 that seems to get pulled out of the loft every summer like it is some kind of seasonal display. And that is why the reaction keeps spreading, because once people start questioning one detail, they begin treating every old mention like it is evidence. Some users say the whole conversation is less about a birthday and more about how quickly a simple date can turn into a public debate online. Others push back and say the speculation goes too far, especially when it relies on old clips, half-remembered details, and comments that were never meant to settle anything for good. Still, the discussion does not slow down, because each time the story comes back around, more viewers jump in, more theories get repeated, and the same disputed points end up getting pulled back into the spotlight.
There's nothing original here.
I hope you're having the best birthday you've ever had. Thank you for everything.
Which is really such a fake.
And after 8 years of books, documentaries, court filings, and even one very expensive Netflix series, people still note that nobody has publicly put the question to the one person who would not need a single sheet of paper to answer it: her mother. Doria Ragland was in that room, not down the corridor and not waiting by a telephone, but right there in the room on the 4th of August, 1981, at West Park Hospital in Canoga Park, out in the San Fernando Valley.
What if Meghan Markle was adopted? What is there more to her birth than just her age? Could it be that she doesn't know her own age because she's been lied to by her father and mother? Could it be that's why Doria doesn't have a bond with Meghan Markle? Because what mother leaves her daughter when she's 3 or 4 years?
Whatever anyone else in this story may have, she has something none of them do. She was the one giving birth, and in 45 years, it seems she has never once been the person asked to confirm the number. 45 candles went on that cake yesterday, and behind all of that sits a woman who, strangely enough, has never been the one made to count.
I remember when she was born, big new addition to the family, and we just have a very young sister here.
So that is what we are doing today. We are not here to pick a fight with anybody, and we are not here to wave a certificate around and tell people to relax. We are going to look at what her own family has put into writing, their own books, their own legal filings, and their own private emails. Because when I sat down and lined those things up side by side, I came across something I honestly was not expecting. And that is where this starts to get interesting. Because once those details are placed next to each other, the story is no longer just about online noise. It becomes about why the same question keeps resurfacing, and why people online keep treating every fresh mention like it changes the entire picture. Some viewers see that as unfair, while others think the inconsistency in public discussion is exactly what keeps the debate alive. Either way, the reaction is not going away, and the more people look for certainty in old material, the more they seem to find new reasons to argue about it. That is why the next part matters, because the written record is where the conversation really starts to tighten.
Thomas Jr. was 14 when Meghan came into the world. Were you disappointed?
No, I just made a little mark on my board and said, oh, there's another lie. Click.
There are more numbers tied to this family than there are people in it. And there is one thing Meghan herself is said to have said about age, out loud and on the record, years before Harry, that almost nobody seems to quote correctly. We will get to that. Stay with me, because once you see the rest, it lands very differently.
This is a copy of 17 magazine, and it was published in March of 1997. In it, it mentions our Megsy from Los Angeles and that she was 21 years old at the time of publication. That would make her birth year at around 1976.
Let's start with who has actually been asked. The list is longer than most people would expect, and neither parent is on it. People have checked the classmates. Someone cross-referenced a childhood friend's birth year. Someone pulled a California state index. Someone else tracked down company filings in London. Another viewer even dug up a magazine from a 1997 archive. It all comes back to documents. Everybody went looking for records, and after 8 years of this, I still cannot find a single instance of anyone sitting down with either of that girl's parents and simply asking them for the year. Not the father, not the mother. And there is a hierarchy here that nobody ever says out loud, so I'm going to say it.
And you're wondering, why does her age matter at all? Because her age would also have an impact on her ability to have children. Because if Meghan Markle is 4 years older than what we have been led to believe, it makes it even more difficult to believe that she was able to get pregnant so quickly.
When a father gives a date, that is still a memory, even if it is a strong one. When a half-sister gives a date, it is usually based on math, and she was only a teenager back then. When a mother gives a date, that comes from the delivery room itself. Those are not the same kind of source at all. One is direct recollection, the other two are reconstructed from what people believe they know. One of you wrote under our last video on this topic, "Don't understand. Her family lived a life around her. They must know her age. Why are they not telling? Her dad must know when she came into the world." 59 people liked that comment, and for a second, including me, everybody was looking right past the one person who was actually there at the time. And that is exactly why the conversation keeps getting louder. Because once people lock onto a detail like this, they stop treating it like a simple typo and start reading meaning into every version of the story. Online, that turns into a whole second debate, one about who is actually in the best position to know, and why the most direct source is the one viewers feel keeps getting pushed aside. That does not mean every comment is fair, or that every theory holds up under pressure. Some of it is just internet overreach, plain and simple. But the reaction shows how fast a small inconsistency can grow into a much bigger argument when public figures, family history, and old records all get pulled into the same frame. And once that happens, people are no longer only discussing a date, they are debating trust, memory, and who gets believed first.
And there was something, in my opinion, missing in their eyes. It didn't seem real to me. And there's a very big difference. It was deliberate. I'll tell you why. What she told the royal family, what she told Harry, wouldn't have jived, wouldn't have been consistent with the truth.
And this is where it gets even more confusing. Doria is not exactly someone who stays silent by nature. In December 2022, she spoke publicly for the first time, and the first line she chose was, "The last 5 years had been challenging." She made it clear she was ready for her voice to be heard, and she went on to talk about the phone call where her daughter said, "Mommy, I'm going out with Prince Harry." She also spoke about race, regret, being followed, and feeling unsafe. What stands out, though, is that during all of that, no one in that production seems to have asked the most basic question, like, "What year was that, Doria? What time was it? What did the wristband say?" Nobody appears to have pressed for that detail, which is strange on its own, but it becomes even more noticeable when you line up the numbers the others have put in writing and compare them side by side.
It was absolutely clear that this young woman was strong in her beliefs. It didn't matter if she was 11 years old. She believed in women, she believed in her own power, and she wasn't afraid to reach out and say, "I want my power, I want my rights."
I'm gonna come.
Keep this one straight, because this part is not coming from random online chatter. Everything in this chapter is pulled from a fact check that was written specifically to settle this debate once and for all. It starts with Samantha's book, which she says was meant to set the record straight about her sister. In that book, she describes Meghan's arrival with the line about the great migration of genes bringing the ship Mayflower to dock at their house, and then she gives a date, August 31st, 1981. The year lines up and nobody is disputing that. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. The year is 1981, and Samantha wrote it down herself. But the birthday people were celebrating yesterday was the 4th, while Samantha's book points to the 31st. That leaves a 27-day gap, coming from the sister who wrote a book specifically to correct the record.
August 4th, 40 years ago, Meghan was born.
Her father claims that she was born in 1981. So if she was born in 1981 when Yasmin did that commercial, and like in 1997, she would have been 16 years of age, not 13.
Now look at the legal filing. In her complaint, she describes what she calls a 17-year age difference between them. 17. That is the number people keep throwing back into the conversation every time they want the debate to end. But she was born in November 1964. When you count that out against August 1981, the gap comes to 16 years and 8 months, not a full 17. So, according to the document itself, she appears to have rounded up in a legal filing about her own sister. And once people notice that kind of mismatch, they do not let it go easily. What starts as a small difference in dates can turn into a much bigger argument about why the records do not line up and which version people are supposed to trust. That is why the conversation keeps circling back to the same point, even when some viewers admit the issue may be nothing more than a rounded figure, a typo, or a detail that was handled loosely in different places. Still, online discussion rarely stays that simple. Some commenters focus on the book, some point to the filing, and others argue that the inconsistency itself is what makes the whole thing feel messy. No official clarification has settled the matter, so the debate continues to live in that gray area where memory, paperwork, and public image all collide. And in that space, every small detail suddenly matters a lot more than it probably should.
So there is something that is not connecting. There is something that is not right.
Then there is Meghan's own writing. In a private 2018 email that later surfaced in court, she described her father's other children as 15 and 17 years old when her parents separated, even though Samantha, born in 1964, is the older of the two. The brother was born in 1966, so the older sister is the one tied to the younger number. The fact-checkers who went through all of this said they could see the mismatch themselves, and they put it in print. The ages, they wrote, were clearly slightly confused. That was their wording, and it is exactly the kind of detail that keeps this whole debate spinning.
Meghan Markle is once again getting trolled. Oh, poor Meghan, the most trolled person in the entire world.
So let's line up what's actually been put on the table. There's a book that points to the wrong date, a filing that seems to round a number in the wrong direction, a private email where one of the most photographed women in the world appears to have mixed up her siblings, and a fact check that lays all of it out before printing the word false at the bottom of the page. And look, the certificate is the certificate. I'm not going to pretend a state index does not exist, because it does. It says what it says, and anyone can read it. But a state index is still a form, and someone filled it out. The people who could have raised questions about this from memory have, between them, given a wrong day, a rounded gap, and sibling ages that do not hold up for long once somebody checks the math. So which version are viewers supposed to treat as the one that holds everything together?
I recall seeing this photo. It was from an article that came out back on November 11, 2017, before Harry and Meghan got engaged. And that is a super important detail. This article that was published on November 11, 2017, with the headline, "The Look That Hooked Meghan's Dad," the charming high school photos of the woman who could be Prince Harry's mother-in-law showing the sweet eyes and afro that Ms. Markle thinks made her father father fall for her, written by Caroline Graham. Yes, the same Caroline Graham who was responsible for publishing those staged photos that ruined Thomas Markle's relationship with his alleged daughter.
Now, here is the part that really stopped me. The long-running theory that keeps showing up under every video on this topic, the one that refuses to go away no matter how many certificates are pointed to, says she was not born in 1981 at all. Instead, the claim goes back to 1976. Some versions say 1977. People link it to that magazine page, to classmates and to viewers who study old photos and argue that the numbers do not quite line up. So, for a moment, let's take that theory seriously and do the one thing almost nobody in this debate seems to have done. Let's actually run through the math and see where it lands. Because once that theory gets mentioned, the whole conversation changes shape fast. It is no longer just about one document or one loose date. It becomes a broader debate about which details people think line up and which ones keep slipping out of place. That is exactly why viewers keep picking apart every record, every caption, and every old reference, even when none of it offers a clean, final answer. And that is where the tension comes from. Supporters say the numbers may have been handled loosely in different places, while critics insist the inconsistencies are hard to ignore. No official explanation has fully shut the discussion down, so the speculation keeps building around the same point, whether people are looking at paperwork, public statements, or the way the timeline is being discussed online.
Fresh-faced and full of hope for the future, she could, surely, never in her wildest dreams have imagined that her daughter would one day grow up and fall in love with a prince. This is Meghan Markle's mother as a teenager with captivating looks, seen in an enchanting photo published for the first time here today. Doria Ragland was just 16 and an outstanding pupil at Fairfax High School in Los Angeles when these pictures were taken for the school yearbook in 1972. Her life then revolved around her studies, listening to Marvin Gaye and fun-filled nights at a local Mexican taco joint with friends. But just 7 years later, Doria would fall head over heels in love with Thomas Markle, a handsome Hollywood lighting director 12 years her senior. Meghan has previously said of their romance, "I like to think he was drawn to her sweet eyes and her afro, plus their shared love of antiques."
Let's look at what her parents were doing in 1976. According to the timeline that has been discussed publicly, they had not met yet. Meghan's own writing places her parents' meeting in the late 1970s. Her father was working as a lighting director on a soap opera, while her mother was temping at the studio. Reports describe the relationship as a fast-moving romance that lasted about 6 months before the wedding. And that wedding can be pinned down to a specific day, the 23rd of December, 1979. It took place at a temple on Sunset Boulevard, with a monk in orange robes officiating. She was 23, he was 35. Years later, an uncle told a newspaper that the family had not heard anything about Thomas until the invitations showed up in the mailbox.
Whatever it was, they married and had me. Yay! The pair married in 1979, and 2 years later, their beloved only daughter Meghan was born.
6 months back from that December wedding, lands the meeting somewhere in the middle of 1979. So put the two timelines side by side. The official version says they met in 1979, married that December, and then had a daughter in August 1981, about 19 months after the wedding. Clean, simple, and on paper it does not raise many eyebrows. But the other version, the one thousands of people have circulated for years, places that daughter's arrival in 1976, or 1977, which would put the birth 2 to 3 years before her parents were even introduced, not before the wedding, before the introduction, before the lighting department and the makeup department were even on the same call sheet. That is not a small mismatch. That is the kind of gap that keeps people talking like there is a ghost at the wedding.
I've lost my dad in this, so him as my father-in-law was really important to me.
I don't know of anybody that cold to do this.
And I want to be very clear about what I am saying, because it is not what some people may think. I am not saying the theory falls apart. Every time somebody has stepped in and told this audience to relax, it has not exactly held up well. What I am saying is that if this theory does hold, then it does not just shift a birthday, it shifts an entire family timeline. Because if she really did arrive in 1977, then that neat little story, the studio, the 6-month romance, the temple ceremony, the baby 19 months later, none of that works the same way. Not the order of it, not the shape of it, not any of it. It would mean somebody may have been changing the story from the very first page. And there she is again, standing quietly at the back of the room, the one who was there. And that is why people keep circling back to it, because once a timeline starts feeling shaky, every little detail starts looking louder than it did before. A date on paper can seem simple at first, but when online discussions begin comparing one version against another, the whole thing turns into a question of consistency, not just memory. That is also why supporters and critics keep talking past each other. One side says the overlap may be nothing more than sloppy record-keeping or a loose public retelling, while the other side treats those gaps as impossible to overlook. No clear public explanation has settled the matter, so the same questions keep resurfacing every time the topic comes back around. And in a story like this, that matters. Because people are not just reacting to one number anymore, they are reacting to whether the surrounding timeline still makes sense at all. Once that doubt is in the room, it does not leave quietly, and every new mention only makes the conversation harder to ignore.
This is the 1972 yearbook, and there you can see that there is Doria. Now, from what I gather, Fairfax High School in their yearbooks only have pictures of sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And in this photo, Doria is a sophomore, which is 10th grade. So that would mean, logically, she would have graduated in 1974.
This is the part that should really make people pause, and it has nothing to do with any certificate. Publicly available details list Doria Ragland as 24 years old on August 4, 1981, and then 25 just 29 days later. That lines up with her birth date, September 2, 1956, in Cleveland, Ohio. So, the picture being discussed online is very specific: 24 turning 25, first child, a newly married husband, and a hospital out in the valley. And honestly, I do not know many mothers anywhere who would be vague about that kind of moment. Ask almost any woman watching this how old she was when her first child arrived, and she is not going to need a second to think about it. She will tell you the age, the hour, the weather, and probably what the nurse or midwife said too, all in one breath. That number sticks, it stays with you.
For years, one of the biggest mysteries surrounding Meghan Markle's mother behind a wall of silence. Questions about her mother's whereabouts were dismissed, while anyone who dared to investigate too deeply found themselves facing extraordinarily harsh consequences. The article I'm about to show you that the palace failed to bury finally explains Doria's long absence.
So here is what people keep pointing to. A woman who, by many accounts, seems very familiar with the timeline, yet over 8 years inside one of the most heavily watched families on the planet, she has given the public just one major interview. Just one. And in that conversation, she said she was ready for her voice to be heard. She had the spotlight, a global audience, cameras rolling, and plenty of time to address the questions. But even with all of that, and with years of headlines surrounding her daughter's age on either side of the story, she has never once said the number out loud. Not in that interview, not in a statement, and not in any quoted remark that has surfaced publicly.
According to Mr. Markle, Meghan Markle lived with him from the age of 10 until she graduated from high school. Meghan Markle alleges many times that her mother lived just 40 minutes down the road from her. Given LA, that is actually a very short distance. The high school principal from Meghan Markle and all the teachers did not know that Doria was Black because they had never met her. Mr. Markle was single-handedly raising Meghan Markle. No vestiges of Doria. Why wouldn't a devoted mother go to meet the teachers, which is mandatory in the state of California? Only one parent has full custody and guardianship of the daughter, which seems to be the case for Mr. Markle.
Now, that could mean nothing. Mothers are not usually expected to publicly verify their children, but that point has been debated in public for years. Books, court filings, newspaper columns, all of it kept the conversation alive. It got so loud that even a British magazine in print, since before Queen Victoria took the throne, felt it had to raise the question. And through all of that, the one person who could probably quiet the whole discussion in 4 simple words has not said a single syllable. Everyone else in this story has some kind of incentive. The father has one, the sister has several, The commentators have a business model, and yes, before somebody says it, so do I. The mother, though, appears to have none. She is not selling a book. She is not pursuing a legal case. She has never publicly tried to profit from any of it, which is why some people see her as the only truly neutral witness in the entire discussion, and the only one nobody has ever seriously called the most invested in the outcome. That is exactly why the silence keeps drawing attention, because in a discussion like this, silence does not read as empty, it reads as something people want to decode. And once viewers start reading between the lines, every old interview, every archived quote, and every carefully worded public appearance gets pulled back into the conversation. Some people see restraint and privacy, others see avoidance and assume it must mean something more. No official explanation has resolved that divide, so the debate keeps surviving on interpretation alone. That is what makes this story so sticky online. It is not just about one age, 1 year, or one family moment anymore. It is about how a public timeline gets judged when people believe too many pieces do not fully line up. And when that happens, the discussion stops being about a single detail and starts becoming about credibility, perception, and why a simple answer has never really settled it.
If you had the option, P. Diner, to interview Meghan Markle, what would be the 3 things that you would like to ask?
I would ask her, girl, did you give birth to those children? Did you really birth those children?
Well, I tried so hard. Did you like it?
Yeah.
That's what I would
Show me the
ask
birth
her.
certificate, okay?
Yeah, show us the birth certificate.
And then there is the other story, because this family has produced 2 births that, in the eyes of many viewers, a piece of paper should have settled, yet neither one ever fully did. You already know the version people keep revisiting. Candles were said to have been brought into a hospital room, Sanskrit chanting reportedly played in the background, and a photograph of his mother was placed on a table. The version that has circulated for years also mentions 2 epidurals. Then, according to that same account, a new mother left a central London hospital and was back on the road home about 2 hours after delivering. 2 hours. And yes, people had plenty to say about that, and it has not been forgotten.
And then Harry in his book says that within 2 hours of the child being born, they were back at Frogmore Cottage. Those are his words. Those are not my words. Those are his.
One viewer wrote, she gave birth in a hospital at age 42 or maybe 43 after 2 pain management procedures and was back in her own bed 2 hours later. Really? A total of 116 people said they agreed with that reaction.
If that is the case, that means that this woman with not 1 but 2 epidural, with a very difficult birth, geriatric, was literally cleaned up. The baby was smucked, wrapped, put in a van, and sent back, because it takes almost an hour from Portland Hospital to go to Frogmore Cottage.
Yes.
How can this woman be allowed? That is a medical liability.
Someone else who seemed to think they knew the details replied underneath, you cannot get 2 epidurals, sorry. And my personal favorite came from a gentleman who skipped past the whole royal-style storytelling and went straight to the only question he cared about. Do hospitals even allow battery candles in their rooms? Seems like a fire hazard to me. Fair question. The version being repeated says they were battery candles, which only opens up a different question. What kind of man brings plastic candles to a maternity ward? Because that is the part I keep coming back to. Not the medical side, the staging and all the little production choices. And that is exactly why people keep circling back to it. It is not just the candle detail, or the hospital story, or even the timing people keep questioning online. It is the feeling that every small part of the tale was arranged so carefully that viewers cannot tell where a simple family memory ends and where public performance begins. Once a story reaches that point, the reaction takes on a life of its own. People stop focusing on the original moment and start dissecting the presentation, the wording, and the parts that were explained too neatly or not at all. Some viewers say that is unfair. Others say the questions would not keep coming if the story did not leave room for them. So, the discussion keeps shifting, not because there is any new confirmation, but because the old details never stopped sounding unusual to the people who noticed them in the first place. And as long as that remains true, every small recollection, every repeat telling, And every polished public version is going to keep getting pulled back into the same conversation.
That's like what's actually out in the world because of people creating hate. It's not just a tabloid. It's not just some story. You are making me scared.
And here is what almost nobody says out loud. Every detail of that day, the candles, the chanting, the epidurals, the 2 hours, seems to come from exactly one source, his own version of events, his own book, his own telling. So when did everyone quietly agree that a man's memoir should be treated like hard evidence about that same man? Nobody sits down to write 400 pages about himself and somehow comes out looking worse than he started. That is basically the opposite of what a memoir is supposed to do. And this is the same household, remember, where one half was previously shown to have mixed up her own brother and sister in writing, something we already watched play out 2 chapters ago in a court file. So no, I am not just accepting the timeline of a birth at face value from the other half of that household because it appears in a paid-for book. And be clear about what I am saying and what I am not saying here.
Long before she was a duchess, Meghan Markle was a queen.
I am not going anywhere near those young people. They are not part of this by choice, and they should not be dragged into it. Not by me, not by anyone. What I am looking at is the account the adults gave of one day, the version they decided to put out there. And like the other story, it keeps changing shape a little every time people examine it closely. There are 2 births, 2 documents that should have shut the debate down completely, at least in theory. Yet somehow, the woman standing closest to either of them has never really been put under the kind of direct, plain question that would settle it. So where does that leave things the day after the 45th birthday? Pretty much right where they have been every August for years. A state index says one thing, a book points to a different day, a filing rounds off a number, an email gets 2 siblings mixed up, and a magazine page from 1997 still sits there with no clear explanation and no retraction. Meanwhile, thousands of people look at the whole pile and refuse to be talked out of what they believe. I am not here to tell anyone they have to agree with one version over another. Even the washing up liquid advert, the story that helped make her familiar to the public as a young campaigner, has been picked over by her own biographers and by a magazine that once featured her on its cover. If that detail itself has been debated this much, then I am not going to act like every story around it is neatly settled. But I did promise you a specific point, so let me get to that. Back in 2015, long before Harry, when she was still working as an actress and promoting a legal drama, Meghan Markle was asked about her age, and she gave an answer that almost never gets quoted in full. She said, and I am using the full wording here, "I think as women actors, the industry can assume they have a shelf life. I'm always told, don't say your age. I'm 33, and I'm really comfortable with that. If anyone has a problem, then it's their problem, not mine." Read that slowly, because there are really 2 voices in that passage. One is describing the rule she felt existed. In her view, the industry can assume a woman has a shelf life. In her view, women are repeatedly told, in the present tense, not to say their age, and that pressure was something she said she had heard more than once, not just from one person on one set. The second voice in that quote is the part people keep coming back to because it does not read like a throwaway answer. It reads like someone pushing back against an expectation that was already hanging in the air. That is why the clip still gets pulled into these conversations, not because it led some viewers to believe anything on its own, but because it adds another layer to the larger debate about image, age, and how much of a public figure's story is shaped by what they choose to say out loud. And once people start looking at it that way, every old interview suddenly feels different. A line that once sounded casual starts sounding strategic. A simple answer starts looking like a message. That does not mean the online criticism is settled, or that every claim being made about it is accurate. It just means the public has learned to read between the lines, sometimes too hard, sometimes not hard enough. So the reaction is not really about one sentence anymore. It is about trust, consistency, and the way polished public narratives can make people wonder what was left out. That is the part that keeps the discussion alive, because even when no new facts are added, the old ones still land with more weight than people expected. And then, just a few words later, The second part seems to undercut that whole idea, slipping past the rule and giving out a number of its own. So which version are people supposed to take seriously? Because you cannot stand in front of a magazine and explain exactly why an actress in that world might keep her age private, then turn around and give your own and expect nobody to notice the contradiction. She had been in that industry since she was a teenager, and she had just put it on the record that there was, at least in her view, a real reason for women in that business to be cautious with that number. She did not just give a number that day, she also gave the supposed logic behind it. There is no mystery there that one afternoon could fully settle. One woman, one question, one sentence. She is in California. She has already sat in front of a camera crew and said she was ready to be heard. So maybe the question should go to her mother. People have been asking the wrong parent for years, and I have too. That part stops here. And honestly, it leaves the bigger question hanging. Do you think that silence is simply a mother protecting her daughter? Or is there a reason no one has ever managed to put her on the spot with that question? I read through every single comment, and one of yours kicked off this whole thread in the first place. And if you ever come across a clip of Doria Ragland being asked about the year, any interview, any decade, any country, send the link below. I'll try to run it in the next one, because the second somebody finally asks her directly, this either ends in 4 words or gets a whole lot more interesting. Either way, that is a moment I would not want to miss. What do you think about all of this? Drop a comment, like, subscribe, and share, and see you on the next one.